Sometimes the most important moments arrive without sound. They pass quietly like a breath you do not realize you were holding. Nothing dramatic happens, no one gathers around, no one marks the time. And yet something begins. It starts with a small choice, so small it almost feels accidental. A pause before speaking, a softened look instead of a sharp one, a hand that does not pull away when it could. To anyone watching, it would seem like nothing at all. But inside, something shifts. There is a feeling that comes before the choice, a tightness, a pressure behind the chest, the familiar urge to respond, to defend, to explain. The mind prepares its words quickly, almost eagerly. It wants to be seen, it wants to be understood, it wants to be right. And in that moment, silence feels uncomfortable, even risky. Have you felt that moment before? That place where sound wants to rise, where emotion leans forward, ready to step out, where staying quiet feels like losing something. This is where the story begins. Not with action, but with restraint. Not with victory, but with noticing. The air feels heavy, as if it is waiting. Thoughts move fast, circling the same point again and again. A question appears, soft but steady. What happens if nothing is said? What happens if this moment is allowed to pass? Silence is often misunderstood. It is mistaken for emptiness, for fear, for surrender. But silence has weight. It holds intention. It carries choice. It asks something of the one who stays within it. In this small moment, the world does not change. The ground stays firm. The night remains quiet. Somewhere nearby, they continue on, unaware. They do not notice the pause. They do not see the effort it takes to remain still. And perhaps that is part of its nature. This kind of strength does not announce itself. Inside, however, the heart is listening. It hears the rush of feeling and lets it move through without chasing it. There is discomfort here, yes. A gentle ache, a sense of standing at the edge of something unnamed. But there is also clarity beginning to form. The silence creates space. In that space, observation becomes possible. Emotions are no longer commands, they are signals. They rise, they speak, and slowly they settle. This is not about kindness that is seen. It is about kindness that happens quietly, without proof. Kindness toward oneself, kindness toward the moment, kindness that chooses not to add more weight to what is already heavy. The choice feels small, but it is precise. Like placing one stone carefully instead of throwing it, like letting water pass instead of trying to stop it. Nothing outward confirms that this choice matters, and yet it does, because something has been preserved, a sense of self that does not need to be defended, a dignity that does not rely on reaction, a calm that grows not from control but from understanding. This is how inner strength often begins, not with force, but with listening, not with words, but with the courage to remain quiet when noise feels easier. The moment passes. Life continues. They move on, unchanged, unaware of what almost happened, but within, something has already turned. A seed has been placed gently in the dark, and seeds do not need attention to grow. They only need patience. After the moment has passed, the silence does not leave right away. It stays, it settles into the body, into the chest, into the spaces where words were meant to go. What first felt like a pause now feels like a weight being carried quietly. There is a strange discomfort in holding back. The mind returns to the moment again and again, replaying what could have been said. Each imagined sentence feels sharp, polished, ready. And yet they remain unspoken. They sit behind the lips, waiting, wondering if they will ever be released. Inside, emotions move like slow water, not rushing, not calm either. Somewhere between, there is a pull toward reaction and, at the same time, a resistance. Silence becomes a narrow path, and walking it requires attention. It is easy to believe that silence means nothing is happening, but inside, so much is happening. Thoughts argue softly, feelings rise, then fall, then rise again. A quiet question appears and disappears. Was this the right choice? Was something lost by staying still? They would not understand this part. They see only what is shown. They hear only what is spoken. They do not feel the effort it takes to remain quiet when the heart feels full. There is a loneliness here, not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from being unseen, carrying something without sharing it, standing in the middle of a moment that feels unfinished. The silence presses gently, asking to be noticed. It asks the listener to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it, to allow feelings to exist without giving them a voice. This is not easy. It feels unnatural at first, like holding one's breath without knowing how long it will be held. Time moves differently here. Each second feels longer. The mind listens more closely. Small sensations become clearer. The rhythm of breathing, the quiet tension in the shoulders, the warmth and tightness that rise and fade. Nothing is resolved yet, and that is what makes it difficult. Silence does not promise relief right away. It offers no explanation, no reassurance. It simply asks for presence. There is a temptation to break it, to say something, anything, just to release the pressure. Even words that do not matter would feel like relief. But something deeper holds steady. A quiet knowing that once broken, silence cannot be returned to its original shape. So the stillness remains. In this space, awareness grows slowly. Emotions begin to show their true nature. What first felt urgent now feels softer. What seemed necessary now feels optional. The storm inside loses some of its force, not because it was fought, but because it was all owed to move on its own. They may think silence is weakness. They may think it means agreement or fear or emptiness. But this silence is full. It is full of listening, full of restraint, full of a careful kind of strength that does not need to prove itself. The weight remains, but it changes. It becomes less sharp, more grounded, like holding a stone instead of carrying a blade. Still heavy, but no longer harmful. There is a quiet lesson hidden here, that not every feeling needs an answer, that not every moment demands expression. Some moments ask only to be held gently until they loosen on their own. As the night deepens, the silence becomes familiar, less threatening, almost protective. It wraps around the listener like a steady presence, reminding them that they are still here, still whole, even without words. And in this quiet discomfort, something important is happening. The self is learning how to stay, how to remain intact even when emotions pull in different directions, how to exist without reaction. The silence does not disappear, but it no longer feels empty. It feels like a space where understanding may one day arrive. After a while, the quiet begins to feel visible. Not because it makes sound, but because others start to notice its absence. They look toward the stillness and try to fill it with meaning of their own. They notice what was not said. They sense what was held back. And in that space, they begin to imagine. They may think the silence is empty, or careless, or cold. They may decide it means indifference or submission or a lack of feeling. It is easier to label silence than to sit with it, easier to assume than to ask. From the outside, restraint looks simple, almost effortless. They do not feel the weight carried beneath it. They do not hear the conversations happening within. They see calm, and they believe nothing is happening. This is where misunderstanding grows quietly. A glance lingers a little too long. A pause is noti. CED. A response never comes. And in those small details, stories are formed. Stories that are incomplete but confident. Stories that explain the silence in ways that feel comfortable to them. Inside, there is a flicker of awareness, a realization that the quiet choice is being read in ways never intended. The heart tightens slightly, not with anger, but with recognition. This is what it feels like to be unseen. There is a natural wish to correct it, to speak now, not from impulse, but from clarity, to explain the silence so it will not be mistaken, to show the depth that was hidden. The urge returns, softer than before, but still present. Would it be so wrong to be understood? The question lingers, and with it, a familiar ache, the desire to be known for what is true, not for what is assumed, the desire to be seen clearly without distortion. But silence does not defend itself. It does not clarify. It allows misunderstanding to exist, even when it feels unfair. And that is one of its hardest lessons. They continue on, comfortable with their version of the story. They do not ask what it took to remain quiet. They do not wonder what was protected by not speaking. They simply accept their own interpretation and move forward. This creates a subtle distance, not physical but emotional, a sense of standing apart, watching from just beyond reach. The listener feels it, gently but surely, the space between what is true and what is perceived. There is sadness here, not sharp, not overwhelming, just a soft heaviness, the kind that settles slowly like dust in still air, the sadness of realizing that silence can hide both strength and tenderness. In this moment, silence is tested, not by noise but by judgment, not by confrontation but by assumption. It asks a deeper question now. Is inner truth dependent on outer understanding? The quiet holds. Inside, something steadies itself. A reminder forms, not in words but in feeling, that being misunderstood does not err. What is real? That truth does not disappear just because it is unseen. The silence becomes a shelter, a place where the self remains intact even as interpretations pass by. It does not chase after clarity. It does not bend itself to be more visible. They may never know. And for a moment, that thought stings. But slowly, another understanding takes its place. That peace cannot rely on recognition. That strength does not require agreement. That some parts of the self are meant to be protected, not displayed. The misunderstanding remains, but it loses its power. It becomes background like distant wind, present but no longer guiding. The listener stays where they are, quiet, observant, whole, and in that stillness, something important is learned. That silence may be misread, but it does not mislead the one who holds it. That even when unseen, inner truth continues to exist, steady and unchanged. The night grows deeper. The quiet remains, and the heart, though misunderstood, where it belongs. At some point without announcement, something begins to change. Not outside, where nothing seems different, but inside, where the quiet has been doing its patient work. It does not arrive as a clear thought. It comes as a feeling, gentle and steady, a sense that the silence is no longer something being endured, but something being understood. The listener notices it first in small ways. The tension that once sat heavily in the chest feels lighter. The questions that repeated themselves begin to slow. The mind no longer circles the moment with the same urgency. There is space now. And in that space, awareness grows. It becomes clear that the silence was never empty. It was full of listening, full of watching emotions rise and fall without being chased, full of restraint that protected something fragile and important. A realization settles quietly, that the urge to react was not always about truth. Often, it was about discomfort, about wanting the feeling to end, about wanting control over how the moment was seen. And with that understanding comes a softer view of oneself. Not judgment, but recognition. A seeing of old patterns, familiar habits of defense and explanation. Patterns that once felt necessary, but now feel optional. The silence did not take anything away. It revealed something. There is a calm acceptance that forms, that not every moment needs to be shaped, that not every feeling needs to be followed. Some emotions are meant to pass through, not to be acted upon. This understanding does not rush in. It arrives slowly, like light spreading across a dark room, each corner becoming visible in its own time. The listener begins to sense a deeper kind of power. Not the power of influence or persuasion, but the power of choice. The power to decide what deserves a response and what does not. It becomes clear that silence was not weakness. It was discernment. It was knowing that the self is larger than the moment, deeper than each emotion that tried to take the lead. There is a quiet respect that arises from this realization. Respect for the self that stayed present, that did not abandon itself for relief, that trusted something unseen would come from staying still. The misunderstanding from before no longer presses so heavily. It is still there, but it feels distant, like a thought remembered without emotion attached to it. What matters more now is the inner alignment that has taken place. A sense of standing upright inside, even while remaining quiet outside. The listener notices a new kind of clarity. Feelings are easier to observe without being pulled into them. Thoughts are recognized as passing movements, not commands that must be obeyed. There is peace in this recognition. Not excitement, not pride, just a steady calm that feels earned, though no effort was made to earn it. The silence has become a teacher, not through instruction, but through experience. It showed what happens when nothing is for. CED. When reactions are allowed to fade on their own, a subtle confidence settles in. Not the kind that seeks attention, but the kind that rests comfortably within. A knowing that inner balance does not depend on outer approval. The listener realizes something important. That self-respect is often quiet. That dignity does not need to speak loudly to exist. That inner power is most stable when it does not need to prove itself. This realization does not close the story. It opens it inward. It marks a turning point, gentle and irreversible. The night feels calmer now. The silence feels different, no longer heavy, no longer tense. It feels like a companion rather than a burden. And in this stillness, the listener understands. The choice to remain quiet was not about avoiding something. It was about discovering something steady, something honest, something that was always there waiting to be noticed. The silence remains, but now it carries understanding. There comes AM. Moment when the choice becomes clear. Not forced, not dramatic, just clear. The noise appears again, familiar in its shape, familiar in its pull, and this time it is recognized before it takes hold. The listener feels it rising, the quickening inside, the urge to respond, to explain, to meet sound with sound. It is not as strong as before, but it is still there, waiting, testing. This time, there is no struggle, only awareness. The silence is no longer a pause filled with tension. It has become a place to stand, a quiet ground beneath the feet. From here, the noise can be observed without being entered. They continue as they always have. Words move around, meanings are assigned, judgments pass by like drifting clouds. None of it is new, none of it asks for an answer. There is a soft understanding now that reacting would change nothing essential, that speaking would only feed what is already moving, that silence is not absence but selection. The listener notices how the body rests, ponds differently. The chest stays open, the breath remains steady, the face does not tighten. There is no rush to fix the moment. This is not avoidance. It is presence without entanglement. A quiet strength reveals itself here, the strength to let things be as they are without needing to shape them. The strength to trust that not every sound deserves a reply. Inside, there is a calm recognition that words once released cannot be taken back. That reactions often speak for a moment, but silence speaks for something deeper. The choice is made again, not out of fear, not out of habit, but out of respect. Respect for the self that has learned to listen before answering. Respect for the space that silence protects. There is no need to announce this choice. No one is told. No one notices. And that feels right. They may believe the quiet means surrender. They may assume nothing is happening. But the listener knows otherwise. Something important is being preserved. The silence feels firm now, not fragile, not uncertain. It holds its shape easily, like still water that reflects without being disturbed. Thoughts pass through without clinging. Emotions appear and fade without leaving marks. The inner world feels orderly, not because it is controlled, but because it is allowed to move naturally. There is a gentle relief in this, not relief from discomfort, but relief from the need to react to it. A sense that peace does not come from resolution, but from restraint. The listener becomes aware of how often reactions were attempts to escape feeling, to shorten discomfort, to regain a sense of balance by external means. Now balance is found internally, quietly, without effort. Silence has become a boundary, not a wall, but a clear line that says, this does not enter, this does not belong here. The noise continues outside, but it no longer reaches the center. It fades before it arrives, like echoes that lose their strength as they travel. There is a softness in tea. Strength, no hardness, no resistance, just a steady refusal to be pulled away from what feels true. The listener sits with this understanding, letting it settle, letting it become familiar. Choosing silence is no longer a single act. It is becoming a way of being, a quiet agreement with oneself to remain grounded, even when the world invites reaction. The night feels still, the quiet feels complete, and in that stillness the listener knows. Not everything must be answered. Not everything must be met. Some things are best allowed to pass unchanged by response. The silence holds. And within it, there is power. Over time, the quiet way of responding begins to shape something deeper. Not quickly and not all at once. It happens in small, almost invisible changes that are felt more than noticed. The listener begins to sense a steadiness that was not there before, a calm that does not depend on how others move or speak, a grounded feeling that stays even when the outside stirs. This strength does not announce itself. It does not ask to be recognized. It simply exists, quietly supporting each moment from within. There is a subtle shift in how emotions are experienced. They still come as they always have: joy, discomfort, uncertainty. But they no longer take control so easily. They arrive, they are felt, and they pass through without leaving disorder behind. The silence has created space for this to happen. Space to feel without being overwhelmed, space to observe without reacting, space to remain whole. The listener notices how restraint has softened the inner world, not by suppressing feeling, but by allowing it to move freely without direction, like watching leaves float by on still water, without reaching out to grab them. This kind of discipline feels different from force. There is no tension in it, no strain. It feels natural, like standing upright without effort. The self-respect that grows here is quiet and steady. It is not built from comparison, not from winning or losing. It comes from knowing where one ends and where the noise begins. They may continue to speak, to assume, to test the silence, but it no longer feels personal. Their actions no longer define the inner state. This is growth through restraint. Not by pushing forward, but by staying centered. Not by proving strength, but by embodying it. The listener becomes more attentive. Small moments are noticed more clearly. The way feelings change shape. The way thoughts rise and fade. The way calm returns again and again when nothing is forced. There is trust here now. Trust in the ability to remain composed. Trust that silence will hold when needed. Trust that the self does not disappear without expression. This trust creates ease. The body feels lighter. The breath flows naturally. The mind rests more often in quiet awareness. Nothing dramatic marks this change. There is no single moment that defines it. It is simply there, woven into the way the listener moves. Rough experience. Strength has become subtle. It does not resist. It does not pursue, it allows. There is dignity in this, a quiet dignity that does not need to be defended, that does not seek confirmation, that exists regardless of who sees it. The listener understands now that restraint is not denial, it is discernment. It is knowing which feelings deserve action and which only need acknowledgement. This understanding brings peace, not excitement, not pride, just a gentle sense of rightness. The silence feels familiar now, like an old companion that no longer needs explanation. It is welcomed, not endured. Even when discomfort appears, it is met with patience. Even when misunderstanding returns, it is observed without urgency. The inner world feels stable, not because it is protected from disturbance, but because it knows how to remain steady within it. This is the quiet growth that comes from choosing not to react, growth that reshapes the self without drawing attention. Grow. That strengthens without hardening. The listener sits with this presence, letting it deepen, letting it become part of who they are. The night remains still. The silence remains kind. And within that silence, a calm strength continues to grow, unseen, unspoken, and deeply rooted. There is something gentle that happens when restraint is met with kindness. It does not arrive as a reward, and it does not announce itself as a lesson. It simply unfolds slowly in ways that are easy to miss unless one is paying attention. At first, nothing seems different. The quiet continues. The listener remains as they were, steady and inwardly calm, and yet, beneath the surface, a subtle shift begins to move outward. The silence that once held tension now carries warmth. Not warmth directed toward anyone in particular, but a softness that settles into the way the heart responds. Where there was once a sharp edge of defense, there is now space. Where there was once distance, there is openness. This kindness is not deliberate. It is not planned. It grows naturally from understanding, from knowing that not every action needs to be met, and not every moment needs to be shaped. They notice it first, perhaps without realizing what it is. The quiet no longer feels distant. It no longer feels closed. Something about it feels different, less rigid, less guarded. And in that difference, something unexpected happens.
The listener remains silent, but the silence is no longer heavy. It carries care. It carries patience. It carries a willingness to let things be without judgment.
This changes the air between moments, subtly, gently, without effort. They may respond differently now, not because they were taught, but because something in them has softened. The absence of reaction leaves room for reflection. The lack of resistance invites a different movement. Kindness does not always look like action. Sometimes it looks like allowing space. Sometimes it looks like not adding weight. Sometimes it looks like remaining calm when unrest would be easier. The listener notices this unfolding quietly. There is no satisfaction taken in it, no sense of having caused a change, just an awareness that something once tense has eased. And with that easing, two inner worlds begin to shift. Within the listener, kindness deepens self-respect. It confirms that strength can be gentle, that restraint can hold care without losing clarity, that peace does not require distance from others, only honesty with oneself. Within them, something else begins to soften as well. Not suddenly, not completely, but enough to matter. The silence has given them room to hear themselves, to feel the impact of their own movement, to sense what was once covered by noise. This is how kindness returns, not as praise, not as gratitude spoken aloud, but as change, quiet, lasting change. No one points to the moment it happened. No one marks it as important. And yet, something has shifted that will not return to how it was before. The listener feels it as a quiet knowing, that the choice to remain calm did more than protect the self. It altered the path of another, gently and without force. This is not a story of transformation that can be told loudly. It does not belong to celebration. It belongs to stillness. Two lives have been touched, not through action but through restraint, not through words but through presence. The listener does not dwell on this. There is no need to. Kindness that expects nothing has already fulfilled its purpose. The night feels softer now. The silence feels shared, even if nothing is said. And in this quiet exchange, something lasting has taken root. A reminder that the smallest acts, when guided by understanding, can move further than the loudest reactions. The listener rests in this awareness. Calm, unchanged on the surface, but deeply shaped within. The kindness remains, quiet, steady, and enough. The night feels settled now, not because everything has been resolved, but because nothing is pulling at the heart anymore. The silence remains, but it has changed its shape. It no longer presses or questions. It simply stays. There is a gentle sense of completion in this quiet, not an ending, but a resting place. The listener sits within it, breathing slowly, feeling the steadiness that has grown over time. Thoughts still appear, but they move like distant lights, passing without demand. Emotions still visit, but they no longer disturb the calm beneath them. Everything feels softer, more spacious. The need to react has faded into the background, not suppressed, not denied, just understood. It no longer asks for attention. There is comfort in this understanding, a feeling of being at home within oneself, as if something that once searched outward has finally turned inward and found what it was looking for. The silence feels honest. It does not hide anything. It does not protect out of fear. It simply reflects what is real. They may still misunderstand. They may still speak into the quiet, but it no longer matters in the same way. The listener does not carry their interpretations inside anymore. There is relief in that, a deep, quiet relief. The heart feels unburdened. Not because it is empty, but because it is no longer crowded. Space has been made, and that space is peaceful. Nothing needs to be added to this moment. Nothing needs to be taken away. It is enough as it is. The listener notices how strength feels now. It is not sharp, not rigid. It is calm, rooted, unmoving in the way mountains are unmoving without effort. Self-respect rests quietly at the center, not defended, not questioned, simply present. There is gratitude here, though it is wordless. Gratitude for the silence that taught without speaking. Gratitude for the restraint that revealed what mattered. Gratitude for the calm that came from staying still. The night continues, unchanged. The world does not pause or acknowledge what has taken place inside. And that feels right. Some things are meant to remain unseen. The listener stays with the quiet, allowing it to settle deeper. There is no rush to leave it, no desire to fill it. This is not the calm that comes after excitement. It is the calm that comes from clarity, from knowing where one stands even when nothing is said. The silence holds steady like a gentle presence beside the listener, familiar now, trusted. And within that silence there is strength, not loud, not urgent, just enduring. The story does not close with a lesson spoken aloud. It closes with a feeling, a sense of being whole without explanation. The listener remains, quiet, grounded, at peace, and the silence remains too, not empty, not heavy, just enough.